class, Prof. JC, and we're going to dive back into our book this week, The Courage to be Disliked. I'm starting on page 23, and I read most of what we're going to talk about today is between the pages of 23 and page 35. I got to tell you, I love this book. I just love this book. It's been good for me, and I hope some of the lessons, I would recommend that you get the book, okay? Again, it's called The Courage to be Disliked, the Japanese phenomenon that shows you how to change your life and achieve real happiness, and that's what this is really talking about, okay? So quick review of last week, we talked about integrity, okay? Integrity is not a good or bad thing, it just is. It's a state of being whole or complete, okay? Happiness equals wholeness. Wholeness leads to happiness. So a life of integrity is what leads to a life of happiness, okay? That means that you are living in a state of wholeness, that who you are is who you are. You're not trying to be someone else. You're not trying to be, well, what other people tell you to be, what other people think you should be. You're living according to who you know you want to be. We talked about how hard it is to change, right? We looked at the idea, what holds people back from wholeness, which leads to happiness. It's the belief and actions that we keep that keep us unchanged, right? So we continue to struggle in states of unwholeness, okay? So a lack of wholeness leads to unhappiness, which leads to more lack of wholeness, which means more unhappiness. What we need to move into is a state of happiness, but that starts with becoming a person who is complete, okay? But we have stories that we tell ourselves that keep us kind of where we are. And we're going to continue talking about that. So that's kind of a recap of last week. And we looked at some questions last week. If there's an area that you're living outside of integrity, what possible story are you telling yourself, right? So there we go. Let's start with page 23 here. And I've got some points I want to make. Again, I just recommend you get the book. It is just really a good book. And I think it's important for no matter where you're at in life. I think it's incredibly important for your journey to understand this idea of integrity. And some of you might be thinking, why am I talking about this? You know, I signed up to study business and numbers and accounting and finance. Great. All of that's important. This stuff that I'm talking to you about today ensures that you will get to the end of your life and say, I did the thing that I was supposed to do. I did the thing that I wanted to do, okay? And I didn't let something hold me back. I didn't let, the unconscious things about who I am hold me back from what I really wanted to do, okay? So I just made some notes here, and I'm going to go based off my notes, and if I need to, I'll dive into the book here. But I'll start off by saying this. Everyone can change. The first step to change is knowledge. The first step to change is knowing. I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but that's one of the statements it makes. It also makes another statement where it talks about doubts are dispelled through dialogue. And so I made a note in my book that said change happens through dialogue. Okay. And here's the idea that there shouldn't be any rush to this. You must arrive to answers on your own. Okay. So this whole idea of becoming a person of integrity, becoming a person of soul, and this is the key. Most people, in terms of change, we think we have to change to become something out there that we're not. Really, what needs to happen is people need to change to become who they really are. If we're not careful, what we've become is the stories we've told ourselves. We've become the stories that other people have told us. We've become what maybe our context and our environment has kind of created us to be. But we haven't really become who we want to be, who we need to be. And I'm a person who believes this, that if you have a dream that you have that's out there, that is what you're supposed to be. That's what you're destined to be. And what holds you back from that is everything we're talking about today. And obviously in the coming weeks, we're going to talk about as well. But today we kind of get to the heart of the matter. You may be asking, why am I not changing? And again, it doesn't have to be some personal, deep thing inside of you. It could be something, why am I not getting better at sales? Why am I not getting better at marketing? Why am I not building the business that I want to build? It's right there. And it's on the tip of my tongue. What we're going to talk about today, this is the reason why you are doing it or you're not doing it. Okay, so we're going to look at this today. Then there's inside of this, part that we're talking about today, inside of this chapter, there's a conversation between the young man and the philosopher. It's called The Youth and the Philosopher. And the conversation is on lacking happiness. Happiness is wholeness. A lack of happiness equals a lack of wholeness. We've already talked about that before. There's a process, the philosopher says, of becoming. Okay. It doesn't happen overnight. This is another reason why a lot of people don't change, because they make a commitment to change. They do something, they say something, they go to a conference, whatever it is, they make this, I'm going to change. And then they realize that full change doesn't happen. The next day they wake up and they still have their old habits. And why do I still have my old habits? I made a commitment to myself I was going to change. Right. And I went to this conference, I spent a lot of money or whatever it is. I've read this book, right? But they realize that it's difficult, and what they're failing to understand is that we didn't get to how we are overnight. We're not going to change into the next person overnight. We can make a commitment immediately to say I'm going to be different, but actually changing into that person, it takes time. There's a process. Okay. But here's the deal, but we can change our future. This book is based on Adlerian psychology. Okay. And what Adlerian psychology tells us is that we choose our lifestyle around the age of 10. You say, come on, JC, I didn't choose my lifestyle. I didn't choose my career. I didn't choose where I'm going at the age of 10. And this book, okay, it's not really about me. It's about this book. This book would argue that yes, you did. And yes, I did. We all did. Based on our race, our nationality, our culture, our home environment. So again, these are all the subconscious things, the things that we can't see that kind of get into who we are. These things determined or helped us determine at age 10, here's the person I'm going to be. Okay. So if you think about that, think back to when you were age 10. And most scientists would say that the brain, where it's most impacted and most influenced, are between the ages of 0 and 6 or 0 and 10. And if you think about if that's the truth, and again, most scientists would believe that, that's why it's so fundamental that kids, at that age, there's a lot of politicians who would even go after and say, hey, we want to make sure that we are, um, we want to make sure that we're providing care. And there's actually a name for this, and I can't think about what the name is, but providing care for those, kindergartens and preschool and early childhood or early childhood education. Why that's so important is because this is when the brain is really setting our personalities between the age 0 and 6 or 0 and 10. So I want you to think back to what your life was at the age of 0 and 6 and 0 and 10. Some of you had amazing lives, charmed, beautiful lives. And you look back and you say, man, it was great. I had parents that loved me. I had grandparents that loved me. I had everything in the world. I had a great home. I was surrounded by beauty and beautiful people and great food and healthy food and all this stuff. And so it's not as hard for you to think about success because you were kind of groomed for it from day one. There's nothing wrong with that. But there might be others of you that you think about your life between the ages of 0 to 6 and 0 to 10. And you look back and you say, man, I was not set up for a lot of success. I was not set up to kind of move in a strong direction. So because of that, your mindset was then kind of formed. Here's who I'm going to become at this age, right? And I think about my own life, and I think about some of the struggles that I've had to constantly overcome myself to get to the next level. And it's just been a constant process of constant evolution to get to the next level. And I'm still trying to evolve to the next level about where I'm going. But I grew up, and I don't want to make this about me, but I grew up in tougher circumstances. We didn't have a lot of money, and our mindsets around money were horrible. I remember hearing my parents talk about rich people in such horrible ways, talk about people with money in such horrible ways. So subconsciously that gets in your mind, and you start to think that all rich people and wealthy people and people that have nice things, they're all bad people. And the older I got, and I started actually making friends with people towards my senior year in high school who their parents came from money, and I would go to their homes and I'd be like, these people are amazing. They're consistent, and they're quiet, and they're doing good things, and they're dedicated to their spouses. They're dedicated to their communities. They're humble, right? They give of themselves to other people. They're kind. And so that began to help switch my mind a little bit around that. But I grew up, my ages 0 to 10 was very much lots of chaos and drama and lots of poverty. And so I continually have to kind of work through that to make sure. Now I'm lucky somewhere along the way, and I think it was the church that my dad chose to be at. and also my mother was an educator, and so some of that mix of all of that got me around some really good people. And I think really it was the church that my dad chose to go to was the in my hometown. I grew up in the Rust Belt in Indiana, Marion, Indiana, and the church we went to at the time was like the church to go to. And I think my dad at the time, he was ambitious, and so he chose that church because it was around all the leaders, the mayor, the city attorney. And again, my town was a town at that time was like 40,000 people. Today it's a city of 28,000 people. So obviously it's a city on decline. But at the time, 40,000 and 2,000 people went to that church. So you can imagine, right? That was an influential, and all the who's who were there. So I think just being there, I got to walk in every week, every weekend, and I saw very successful people. And there was a local college, and so a lot of professors would go. So I think that I was lucky enough that I was adopted into a family of educators, number one. So education was always important, but also into a home that even though we were dirt poor, my dad chose to go to the wealthy church on the other side of town. And that got me around really success-minded people. That helped a ton. I think that helped. So I think even at that age, my mindset was thinking about, okay, what could I do? But not everybody's given that. That was a gift of privilege for myself, even though we weren't wealthy at all and didn't have any money. And to this day, my parents aren't wealthy people at all. But I was allowed to be around some people. So that helped change the mindset. But I want you to think about yourself. Okay. Where were you at between the ages of 6 and 10? Okay. And if there are maybe issues that you would have moving to the next level, could it be because your personality was kind of set then, right? You chose your lifestyle then. Now watch this. Here's the problem with that, okay? Here's the problem with that. Not the problem with the concept, but here's the problem with choosing our life between the ages of 6 and 10. This happens, again, according to Adlerian psychology, but here's the problem for you and I. We are living in the present with agreements we made in the past. Okay? You are living in the present with agreements that you made in the past. That's when it becomes an issue. Is that people today will still say, well, because my parents, I can't XYZ. Because I grew up poor, I can't do XYZ. Because of this, I got bad grades here. I can't. It's one of the reasons why, and I don't know if it was this podcast or the last. So I'm recording all my podcasts today, so they all start running together. But I was talking about some of our students that come into the program, our graduate programs, and they're called exception students. And they're called exception students, not exceptional, but they're exception students because they've had low GPAs. The thing I love about talking to our exception students, most of them, is they understand why they maybe got that original GPA, but now they decided to live under a different agreement. So they're not letting that stop them, like so many people do. Well, I didn't do good in undergrad, so there's no way I'm going to go back and get a graduate degree. I'm not going to get a master's or a doctorate because I didn't do great back then, right? And what these exception students, most of them I talk to, what's very cool is they've decided to break that agreement and say, no, I didn't do well then, but today is today. I'm going to do better now. Immediately, right? Once we have that talk, I'm saying, you're in, right? Some of them work out, some of them don't, okay? Most of them actually, what we've seen with the data, most of them actually do work out, okay? So if there are areas of your life that you're living outside of integrity and you're unwilling to change, you're unable to change, it's because you're making the decision not to. Why? Because change is scary, change is risky. Again, if your mindset has been set between the ages of 0 and 10, okay, and there's things that you're wrestling with, things that you're struggling with today, your mindset was set, well, change is scary, change is risky. And here's the thing, we lack courage to move forward and change. And here's what it actually says here. I actually want to come to where it says, because I underlined it, it was amazing. And so the last paragraph here on page 35 says this: yes, Adlerian psychology is a psychology of courage. Your unhappiness cannot be blamed on your past or your environment, and it isn't that you lack competence. That's the same for all of you as well. I mean, you're in a master's degree program, you obviously have competence. And then it goes on to say, the philosopher goes on to say, you just lack courage. One might say you are lacking in the courage to be happy. And that's where the rest of our semester is going to go. We're going to spend a lot of time on this during our podcast. on this book, The Courage to Be Disliked, because here's what I found is, again, I work with obviously college students, graduate students, but I also work with companies and industry, Fortune 500 leaders. And this would resonate with many of them. And many of them, again, Fortune 500 senior vice presidents would say things like, I am lacking happiness in my life because I'm lacking courage. And if they're saying it, I guarantee you it's applicable to us as well. So this is what we're talking about this week. And here's the question I'm going to ask for you to just consider and to reflect on. It kind of goes back to what we talked about last week, the stories that we tell. That's what, right? We have this kind of mindset that if something happened to me way back in, then it still impacts me today. What could be, okay? What could be the former agreements that you made with yourself that you're still living with today? I just want you to think about that. What could be the former agreements that you made? So that's question number one, back in ages of 0 to 6. And it could be something along the lines of, it doesn't have to be bad, but it could be, a lot of people when they're young, because their biggest influences are school teachers, they say, I want to be a school teacher. And then maybe you're struggling in your current career, and it could be that there's this agreement that you made way back when you were 10 and you're still struggling. Well, I said to myself I was going to be a school teacher, and now I'm trying to be this, but I feel really guilty because now I'm trying to make money and now I'm in a different industry or whatever it is. But I made this agreement back then. Or it's an agreement that you said, I'll never, ever leave my parents, right? They've been so good to me and I'll never leave my parents. I'll never leave my family. And now you find yourself 20 years later, and the only way you're going to get to where you want to go is you've had to leave your family behind, but there's guilt there. Okay. And so that could be the agreement that you made. So I want you to think about that. What agreement did you make between the ages of 6 and 10 that you still could be living, with? Agreement that maybe needs to change. And then the next question is there an area of your life that you would say that you lack courage? Those are just two questions. Again, these are all reflection questions because I want you to think about this, because I want you to become the greatest business person you can possibly be. I want you to become the greatest organizational leader you can possibly be. But this stuff right here is what holds people back time and time again. Okay? That's all I got for you. I'm spending a little too much time on these podcasts because I get so excited about this book and what it's teaching us. But I got to let you go. So please answer those questions, and I look forward to reading your responses. Thanks so much for the work that you're doing and the reflection you're bringing to this class. Reach out if you need me. Take care. I'll see you in the next podcast.